This is the Branding Business School Podcast, the go-to business and marketing podcast for ambitious women looking to start and scale profitable businesses. Learn from your host, Victoria Marcoullier, how to build a powerhouse brand in this online era without sacrificing your sanity or misplacing your priorities. We support the dreamers and the disruptors and are showing up weekly to teach you practical advice on what it takes to become the go-to in your industry. Operating an online business as a female entrepreneur looks different these days, and thanks to us, so does business school. Welcome to the Branding Business School Podcast.
Hey guys, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Branding Business School Podcast. Today I have a very special guest on that I'm so excited to interview. We are speaking with Jessica Frigon. She is a fractional COO, strategic operations architect, and the founder of HavenOaks, which is a full-service operational partnership for creative women founders who are ready for the business behind their brand to finally match the standard of the work that they deliver. With nearly 2 decades of experience building operational foundations from the ground up, Jessica goes into the businesses she works with, fully architecting the systems, team structures, and leadership infrastructure that allow founders to step into their role as creative visionary and CEO without losing themselves in the process. She is also the co-founder of Clarté and the host of At Home with Founders, a podcast for the real human side of building a business. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love chatting with you, so I'm excited to have another conversation.
I know. So I was just on the At Home with Founders podcast. That interview is live for you guys to listen to. We'll link it for you in the show notes. But Jessica, give us the backstory, a quick backstory of what you do and who it is that you serve.
So I'm a fractional COO, which we'll get into if you don't know what that even means. So I architect the operational foundation for creative founders that have built something beautiful, something really impressive, but whose business still completely depends on them to function. So I step into the business fully, the chaos, the mess behind the scenes, the complexity, everything that's living in the founder's head, and I build out the operational foundation that the business and the founder never had. So the systems, the team structure, the leadership infrastructure, so that she can really step out of that day-to-day to the role that she was really meant to be in, the creative visionary role, the CEO role that she actually wanted to be in when she started it.
Okay, so for the person listening who this is the first time they're hearing the phrase fractional COO, what does that mean?
So COO is Chief Operating Officer. It might seem very corporate to a lot of people tuning in that have escaped that world, but it is very much universal and still applies to online businesses. So the COO is the individual within the company that runs the operational side so that the CEO can stay focused on the vision and the growth development of the company. So in a larger company, this role is typically full-time, but fractional actually just means that I serve in a capacity for a fraction of the time and also a fraction of the cost, because it is a very hefty cost for a full-time COO. So instead of hiring somebody at a full-time capacity, which most small businesses actually aren't ready for, we'll talk about kind of when they should look at those types of roles, they get that same level of strategic operational support and leadership on a partnership basis. And I thought that that was really important because I think that you should have a strong foundation to start with, because the larger your business gets, the more complex it gets, the more of a project it becomes to then build out the foundation. And I think that these women building these incredible businesses really deserve that level of support when they're doing something like that.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the origin story of HavenOaks. What were you doing? Were you freelancing? How did you get into the world of even being a fractional COO before you turned it into a business?
It's a very long-winded story of how I got to where I am today, but essentially this is something that I was doing in corporate for a very long time. Way back in the day, I was a wedding planner, and I did that for a number of years, and then my family got hit with a major health crisis, and I needed something a little bit more stable, something that had more structure to it. So I went into corporate, and I built a career there for over 15 years, managing multi-million-dollar projects, building a startup from the ground up where you literally walked into a blank office, no letterhead, no computer setup whatsoever, and we built that foundation from the ground up and redefined the industry for what we were doing. From there, I realized that there was this online space. I wasn't really on social media, and I started dabbling in that after a very big burnout period. I needed something to light the spark within me a little bit more, and I joined online, and I came across this new space that I hadn't been aware of, and realized that what I could do in the offline space actually translated into the online space for founders building businesses there. So it was a very long organic journey of getting to where I am today, but essentially that experience that I built in corporate translated, and it just worked out beautifully, to be honest.
Maybe what corporate America does well is the operational side of things, and then they lack in other areas. So I guess tell me a little bit about the early days of starting HavenOaks. You wanted to take this hard skill set that you had learned in corporate America and the lessons that were working for these big multi-million-dollar companies and apply them to the online business owner. But what did you want to do differently?
Right back to what you said, a lot of corporate companies don't actually do operations well. Which is surprising.
That's fair.
It's a lot of the times they're implementing tech like way after the fact, and building out the workflows. It's a mess. It really is. No matter what kind of business you're building, the operational side is just trying to catch up with all the growth. So don't ever look at these big companies and think, oh, they have it all together. They really don't. They really don't. We're all in the same boat when it comes to building that back end of the business. But what I wanted to do differently with HavenOaks is have more of a partnership with the founder, because it's different than corporate. They are pouring their heart and their soul into this business. It is their baby from the start. They're very passionate about it. It's very vulnerable for them. They are, going through the biggest self-development journey that they've ever been on, starting a business. And I really just wanted to create a safe space for them to be able to really just let it all show. I'm in there with you. We're going to build out the systems that you need in order to support your next level of growth. I wanted them to feel like they truly had like somebody by their side doing this with them, because it is very lonesome. So instead of being on a retainer basis like a lot of OBMs do, and they're in the business 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, possibly depending on the retainer that they have, I wanted to be really embedded within their business so that I understood it from the inside out and was able to support them as they grew through different milestones, because I already knew them. I already knew the business, so they didn't have to start from scratch with somebody else. So based off of all of that, I created HavenOaks to partner with founders in a different way than is typically seen in the industry.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the phrase OBM, Online Business Manager. That phrase and the term VA, a virtual assistant, that's maybe more commonly used and understood in this female business owner online sector of the market, right? So what is the difference between an OBM and a fractional COO? And I guess when you were starting HavenOaks, did you offer both of those services, or did you exclusively want to come in and offer something that was higher touch than what an OBM could do?
These terms are very much talked about online, and there is confusion as to what is what and when should you hire which role. So a VA, so the virtual assistant, is somebody that you're going to bring in when you're in the early stages of your business. I would say 100 to maybe 200K a year. And that is someone that you are essentially wanting to take tasks off of your plate for them to handle for you. So that is maybe the admin work, maybe that is scheduling, sending out a proposal, just doing some tasks that you can essentially just hand off, but you are still very much driving the boat or driving the car, however you want to see it. They're just taking the execution off a specific task off of your plate. And OBM becomes the right choice when you have contractors in place, you have a team in place, but the coordinating of all of them becomes a job in itself. Projects maybe are getting delayed because there's no one really tracking the deliverables and where everything is at. You are just having too many moving parts to manage as well, from the business side and also the team management side. So the OBM will come in and take off the project management aspect and the team coordination from your plate. So they're going to be your right-hand person from that perspective, but you're still the one that's making all the calls. And again, this kind of makes a little bit more sense from the mid to late six figures. So I would say 250K, but it also depends on your team. If you're solo at 250K, you don't need an OBM, right? Like if you just have one contractor at that point and you're good, you don't need an OBM. So it's really just understanding what it is you're currently at from a team structure, business structure, client deliverables perspective, and also revenue, if that makes sense, because they are higher cost. Fractional CEO typically, so outside of HavenOaks, because I like to support at the earliest stage as possible to set them off on the right foot, but a fractional CEO is the right hire when the business has real operational complexities. So they have a team in place, there are more full-time team members rather than contractors, they have a very strong client base, there's multiple service lines in place, and she needs someone that can come in from a strategic perspective and build out the entire operational foundation. They're looking at redesigning how the business runs across the entire business. So that's through all of the different areas: marketing, operations, finance, making sure everything's in place from a branding perspective, team oversight, they're looking at it all. So this typically becomes relevant when they're approaching, I would say, 7 figures to like 8 figures. So there's, again, some factors in there that you have to kind of take into place as well.
When you're at the level of bringing on a fractional COO, you're kind of bringing on a strategic thinker now to come in so that you're not the only strategic thinker in your business, which for many founders, you are for the first couple of years, depending on how quickly you scale. And that really does reduce a heavy burden. I can tell you, when I kind of went through that transition of no longer being the only person bearing the full mental load of strategy and marketing and planning and business architecture, it really changed a lot for me, particularly as, a young mom with several kids that were very young and home with me. But tell me a little bit about what is the resume of somebody who would make a good COO? Because you kind of have to know a little about everything, right? You mentioned finance, marketing. So what are we looking for when we're hiring a fractional COO for our business?
So they don't have to have an understanding of how to build out the marketing strategy, because you will have somebody in place that is a specialist in that area. They're more so from the operational perspective, making sure that everything is running efficiently for those departments to be able to operate at its best. So they're also looking at it from supporting the CEO in executing their vision and where the business needs to go. So they're basically the CEO's executor. So here's where the vision is. This is where we want to go. Let's create the plan and let's make sure that all the departments are optimized in order for us to be able to get to that next level without it becoming a chaotic mess behind the scenes.
You've been doing this for almost a decade now. I would love to hear how the business has changed, what it looks like today compared to what it looks like in the first couple of years, and then what prompted some of those shifts.
In the early stages, I was doing more so projects. I would step into the business and execute a certain type of project, whatever it is. It was more one-off partnerships. And then from there, I learned that there was a role called OBM. And I was like, all right, this seems a little bit more aligned to what I do in corporate. I didn't know that this even existed. So then I tried that out and hated it. Absolutely hated it. I am not a person that does the same thing on a set every single day and manages the team. I'm very different. Even though, yes, I am a fractional CEO, I don't want to run your business. I have my own business to run. I want to be able to support you to become efficient on your own. Right? So I tried that out and absolutely hated it and was like, okay, there's got to be a different way. So I started diving into this a little bit more and figuring out how I worked best and how I can best support individuals with their own businesses, and came to the idea of more of a fractional CEO support. So it was a natural evolution of just trying things out and figuring out what was best for me, but also for clients, so that I can make the most impact with them.
So this is a unique theme that just keeps coming up in, last season of the podcast and certainly in this season, just about building a business that's not so dependent on the founder. I hired Tailored Premier last year to come in and audit my business. I was in year 7. We're coming up on year 8 now. At this point, yes, I have a team. I actually have a full-time COO. And, we've certainly made great strides. I brought in thinkers and partners along the way to help me build what I've built. But for the most part, what you see of Brandwell was me figuring it out as I went, as it is with most business owners, right? But I was getting to the point where I was like, okay, you know what? I do not feel like I can get Brandwell to this next stage of growth that I would like to get to without bringing in somebody who has been there, done that. Somebody who has not only achieved the type of success that I want to achieve themselves, but has also come into specifically design agencies and helped them build in such a way to help them also achieve that success. And again, success is such a relative word because it's going to mean different things to different people. That was the lens in which I looked for a coach or a business mentor. And I found Jessica Marks of Tailored Premier. And her messaging, which inevitably was why I ended up choosing her, was that she helped businesses build in such a way that they were no longer dependent on the founder. I remember hearing her on Amy Porterfield's podcast say that so often people hired her because they wanted to build their business to sell, because it was their only out, right? We build these businesses that suddenly we become slaves to, and now we no longer enjoy it because we're not even getting to do the creative work in which why we started the business. Now we're just doing operational stuff, admin stuff, putting out fires. But when you build the business intentionally and strategically and not so founder dependent, you usually don't even want to sell. And I remember that really sticking with me. And, selling Brandwell has really not been on my radar. Someday, potentially, I'm not going to say it's off the cards, but right now it feels like the perfect fit for my family in this particular season. And I get a lot of creative satisfaction from running it. Her teaching me how to build a business that wasn't so dependent on the founder was just such attractive messaging, because you get to a point where it's not just about the revenue, but it's about other things. It's about do I feel like my work has meaning? Do I feel like this is impacting other people's lives? And for me, every time I had another kid, I just felt like my time became even more valuable. And that raised my standards for what I was willing to step away from my family to do. And so, working with Tailored Premier was a really wonderful thing. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten some more insight that I otherwise couldn't have found myself. I would love to hear, because you kind of touch on a similar pain point and you do a similar thing for businesses. What would you say are the subtle signs that a business is founder dependent, even if the business looks like it's super successful and everything's going well on the outside?
So I would say that she's the only one that knows where anything is. So their online storage system is a mess. Processes live in different areas. The tech stack is very much in different silos. Every decision that is coming across the business, whether it's big or small, still finds its way back to her somehow. Her team, she has a team technically in place, but they're orbiting around her rather than independently operating. She's the one that remembers every little detail that needs to happen the next day. Maybe the follow-up needs to go out, the client deliverable, she had a conversation with that client, they need to make an adjustment, but she didn't communicate it to the team, and she's the only one that remembers that needs to do it. The testimonial request needs to go out, but it's already 7 days late. Nothing is systematized in order for everything to happen independently, and her team isn't set up to be able to own their lanes and have authority within their roles as well. She's hiring, she has the team in place, but more people, it just really means that she's more involved because now she's managing them. There's that extra layer added onto her plate for double checking work, answering all their questions repeatedly. Maybe the same one is coming across her desk all the time. And then the internal is really the hardest one to name. I would say that she feels really guilty every time she takes any kind of step back. She maybe wants to take a day off to do something because she needs a timeout, and she's feeling guilty because there's things that need to happen. Her team is relying on her. Things are pausing because she's not there. She's feeling overwhelmed because she should be tracking KPIs. She should be planning for the upcoming year, but there's just no capacity for it. She's drained at that point. One thing that I find a lot of people also get to the point is, wondering if she's even capable of running a business. She looks up to these other founders and they seem to have it all together, but she doesn't. And everything is basically running through her. She needs to be involved. She is the engine that keeps the business moving forward. And those are generally the signs that I see.
You're speaking to me, honestly, and this was a big revelation through going through the audit that I talked about. And I think there's more at play here, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But sometimes it feels really good to be needed. And I know that founders can relate to this as you do start hiring a team and they become more autonomous and the business starts to run, quote unquote, without you. That can almost feel a little threatening. That can feel like, okay, in some ways this is exciting. This is what I wanted, right? But then in other ways, this is my business. I don't want to get too detached from it. I was the one that made it successful in the first place. So if I step away, it's no longer going to be successful. So tell me a little bit about like, why do you think maybe high performing, high achieving women unintentionally build businesses that rely entirely on them?
So I'm going to talk about creatives. Honestly, for creatives, that's just how it goes. It's a norm. It's primarily a talent first business. This is what creates its success, just like you said, so does the complexity, and the founder was never prepared to be able to do everything else that comes along with running a business. So the systems, the operations, building a team, the difference between managing and leading them, strategic planning, profitability, they're not prepared for that, and it's absolutely normal. So in the early stages, everything is going to depend on them because it's built off of their talent. And this is absolutely normal for every single founder. I just want to point this out that we all have our zones of expertise, and we start with that when we're building a business. It's centered around that expertise. And there's so much more that comes along with running a business that we don't have knowledge in, we don't have experience in, we're not experts in. For example, I might be great at operations, but I suck at marketing. Right? And marketing is a very critical aspect of a business, just like operations. They're all part of an engine that makes the whole car run, and you need them all, but we can't be experts in all of them. So what we do, the key is bringing in people, just like you did, that are experts in the areas that we aren't, so that we can see our blind spots, we can see the gaps, we can fix them, and then become a more well-rounded team and company.
There comes a point in business where your offer being really good is expected. Like, that is not a differentiator anymore. If your offer has competition, branding becomes the deciding factor. And branding is all about shaping perception. When somebody lands on your website, their brain is deciding in a matter of seconds whether or not they trust you, whether or not they feel like this is for them, and whether or not they think it's worth the price point. Your brand and website are going to answer those questions long before you ever get the chance to. And at Brandwell Designs, we make sure that your brand is answering those questions correctly and priming your audience for the sale. Through strategic branding and Squarespace website design, we develop brands that showcase just how good you really are. Every detail is intentional. Every decision that we make is strategic. And the result is a brand that positions you as the obvious choice for your ideal clients before the first conversation even happens. If your current brand or website is no longer matching the level that you're operating at today, go to brandwelldesigns.com and set up a free discovery call. I shared this on your show when you interviewed me, but there is a part of many founders that we equate being needed with being valuable, especially if in the early stages when we were everything to the business, like that stepping back can feel like you're removing the very thing that made you essential. But what I have really learned to be true when it comes to leadership is that it's not about being needed for everything. It is about building something that does not rely on you for every decision. And that is actually what allows the business to grow. I love the saying, I read it in a book somewhere, but it says, when you free up your time, you free up your mind. Every time that I have found a way to free up my time, whether it was by like truly letting my staff just own their lane and run with it, even when I wanted to get in and like nitpick and make it perfect, when I let them do that, or this has been true of every maternity leave, I come up with the next idea that eventually fuels Brandwell into the next phase of growth. It was on my maternity leave with my second baby that I came up with the idea for the branding business school. And 4 weeks after having a baby, I had this entire launch plan for the next business venture that I would go on. And that is the byproduct of having a freed up mind, right? Having freed up time. I think this is just a really, really valuable conversation to have with business owners who think that being needed makes them valuable, when really, oftentimes, if you're the founder of the business, the greatest value that you can provide to the business is to be the visionary, to continue evolving and continue kind of innovating for the next phase. Because as we all well know, it's 2026. Everyone's talking about AI. It's transforming every business. It doesn't matter what industry that you're in. You have to take time to figure out, what is my business going to look like in this new online era? Because what worked 2 years ago is no longer working. And if you don't give yourself the time because you're so bogged down just in the weeds or micromanaging your team or delivering client work, then your business may not survive the next online evolution, So maybe speak to that a little bit, just about the ability to plan for the future by having your here and now freed up a little bit.
Just like you said, the more that you can get off your plate and stop doing that you don't need to be doing as the founder, the more capacity you have internally to just be in your business, to think a little bit more, to lead your team better. And that space in your brain allows you to just take a step back and think more strategically. That brain bandwidth is just so important. And unless you get out of the weeds, you're never going to have it, and you're never going to be able to think in the future at all. Like you said, being the founder, being the business owner, your role is not to be executing the day-to-day. Your role is to be in the strategic visionary role, to hold the vision for the company, for the team, the one that is figuring out how we're going to get to that next level, working on the business development. There's just like relationships that you need to build out as well. There's just so much more that comes along with that you need that energetic capacity for, because it is just so much more than just doing. But there are founders that just don't want to do that, and that's okay. You can still be very much successful as a solopreneur with a VA or a contractor, a design assistant, whatever it is that you need, and make 200, 250K, and you're good to go. It really honestly depends on what you're wanting for yourself, what do you want for your life, and how's your business going to support that.
How can we tell the difference between I need to be involved in this or I've trained my team to need me?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. So when you step back as the founder, does the business slow down? Does the team pause? And is it because your expertise is genuinely needed? Or is it because your team and the business itself have not been given the processes, the tools, the clarity, or even the ownership to move without you being involved? So if it's the first, it's your involvement is very strategic. You are needed in certain types of capacities. There are decisions and there are pieces of work that are legitimately still going to need you involved. But if it's the second, it's because you haven't built a business that doesn't need you. It means that you trained a business to need you, meaning that you trained your team to always depend on you, to come back to you, because you haven't built the structure for them to own their roles independently. And there's a huge difference between the two. So the tell is usually in the questions that the team is going to ask you. So if they're coming to you with things that you think that they should already know, or that they've asked you more than once, it's not because they're not capable within their roles, it's because the answer was never written down. The process is never documented. The decision-making framework isn't there for them to know what decisions they need to take ownership of versus you need to be brought in. So it's not really, a lot of people think that it's a team problem. It's an individual on their team that is just not the right fit. But really just give them the foundation that they need to own their lanes so that they have the ability to be successful without you. And then another tell is, when she's not available, does everything pause? Does it all stop? Do things start piling up in her inbox or maybe in her Slack messages? Her team just feels stuck. They don't know how to move forward. These are all telltale signs that a business has been built on the founder, and when the moment that she steps out of the room, everything is going to stop moving, and she needs to honestly take a good look at that in order to build out the operational foundation that's going to support her being able to step out. That's the only way you're going to be able to grow.
Yes. Okay. So I talk a lot about how, my journey of becoming a mother times 3 while simultaneously, scaling Brandwell and hiring a team. They've been happening simultaneously with each other. And in so many ways, that has been such a gift to the way that I'm building my business and just the intentionality behind how I'm setting it up. The fact that I even give thought to business architecture, which we're going to talk about a little bit, because I didn't really have the luxury of doing it any other way, right? So I had a service-based business and I myself was having babies where I had to even like physically remove myself to be in the hospital to like go through the postpartum stage. And so I didn't want the service to stop. And so I started hiring very early on. But something that I have seen through now 3 maternity leaves is stepping away for any amount of time. It serves as like a really good pop quiz for the systems and the operation of your business. Every time I saw what my team excelled at, and I got to come back and praise them for that and reward them for that and recognize a strength in my business that I could lean into. And I also saw where you mentioned there weren't SOPs, there weren't standardized procedures written down for them to feel like they had a resource other than me, right? With my 3-day-old baby, where they had to chat me and be like, I'm so sorry, but can you tell me like what to do here? For the most part, like my last maternity leave, by far the best one. Now, my managers who were in place, they had been with me at that point for like over 5 years. So I know that I'm lucky in that way that I've had people that just, they've been in proximity for so many years. They really do kind of know how I think. They can get in my head. And that can't always be expected. You mentioned that, people assume it's a team problem, but it may not be a team problem. I think some of the best advice that I could give, just based on my own like lived personal experience, having hired many people over the last 6 or 7 years, is like they will adapt to the environment that you create for them. And I've not been perfect at this by any means. When somebody comes to me with a question that I know that they either know the answer to and they're just looking for validation, or I know that they could figure out the answer, if I immediately respond with a solution, I guarantee you they're going to be back in my inbox next week with a similar question, right? Because I've trained them to come to me for solutions. So if you as the founder are continually handing out solutions, why would they ever take the extra 5 minutes to go figure it out themselves, or even the extra couple of days to figure it out themselves? But when you keep kicking it back to them, when they say, hey, Victoria, I got this email from a client. What do you think I should say? If you say, well, what would you say? What do you think you should say? And it's going to feel a little uncomfortable for both of you guys at first, especially if you're a doer, you're a fixer. Most entrepreneurs are. That's why we built the business, because we saw a problem and we wanted to fix it. But I can tell you that I've had the same girls for 6 years, and they operate so differently and so much more autonomously in the last 12 months because I started kicking things back to them. And I remember my boss, when I worked in corporate America before I started Brandwell, he was so good at this, and it drove me absolutely nuts, because I'm like, no, I really need you to answer this question for me. I've got a million things to do. But looking back now, and especially from the lens of owning my own business, I see what he was doing. He was training up problem solvers, not problem makers. And that is such a gift, because if you have a whole team of problem solvers, then that's another thing that's going to really free up your mind and your time, because as you scale, everything gets amplified, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So if you have a small team of like 2 or 3 people and you are able to present solutions to them every time they come to you, well, what if the business grows? What if that team doubles or triples? Next thing you know, you have 50 people that are coming to you for solutions, and you're burnt out, you're ready to exit now.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned this. A lot of people, when they're hiring, they're looking at the skill set and the experience, but I honestly think that you should be looking at the soft skills. Like, are they problem solvers? Are they critical thinkers? What exactly is their work ethic? There's just so much more that comes along that you can't teach. Skill you can teach. How to execute a certain role you can teach. Yeah, it might take a little bit more time. But these integral things as to how they behave, you can't teach. It's very much ingrained, and you have to coach them to behave a certain way so that you can be independent from the day-to-day.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about business architecture. If somebody is starting from scratch, what are the foundational pieces that they should put in place early on to avoid becoming the bottleneck later, like we've talked about?
So when you're building out your business operations, and we're talking about service-based businesses here, build out your client experience. Get that done, because that is the biggest aspect of your business, and that's going to free up a lot of time right out of the get-go. So you want to map out your client journey from end to end. That means from very first inquiry through onboarding, proposal follow-up, all that type of stuff, delivery of work, offboarding, post-partnership nurture to maintain that relationship, whatever that looks like, you want to map that out and build out all the templates. Even if it requires a level of personalization, you want to build out every single template that is needed in order to support executing that process so that everything that goes out is in your brand voice. It's already done, it's saving time. And then from there, that's going to tell you what tech you need. So for client experience, you need a CRM. Absolutely get a CRM. And you need a project management tool. You got to think a little bit more long-term when you're choosing these tools as well. So I would say ClickUp is the one that you can grow into. It's a complex tool. There's a lot of features and whatnot, but it's not something that you're going to have to switch once you get to a certain size. You can grow into it. Once you have that in place, then you can identify what exactly you can automate with those tech tools. So implement your workflows and your automations, and then you can look at delegation. So you never want to pay somebody to execute something that doesn't require a human touch that can be automated through tech. So you want to get the automation piece done first, and then you look at delegation opportunities. What do you honestly need to be touching as the founder versus what you can offload to a team member? So once you get that piece sorted, then you can have space to start looking at the different areas of your business. So that could be, making sure that all of your branding elements are in place. Everything is solid there. Then you can look at maybe the marketing, your marketing strategy, making sure you have a content creation process and system in place, making sure that you have all of the library of resources that they need. So whether that's like graphics, images, content bank that they can pull from, etc., so that they're not always coming back to you to create content from. Your KPIs, making sure that you are identifying exactly what you need to track that is actually valuable information for your business and for your team so that you can make data-informed decisions. And then if you have a team, you want to make sure that you have team oversight in place. So hiring strategy, the candidate management as well. So once you're going through the interview process, making sure that that's sorted, then onboarding, making sure that they're introduced to your company in a very well thought out, intentional way to take that off of your plate as the founder or a team member that might have to handle that. And then you want to make sure that all of the roles are clearly defined and there's KPIs that are measured against each role within the company. And then from there, you want to make sure that you're reviewing performance on a regular basis as well and coaching your team to become even better every time. So there's lots that goes into the team oversight that is often overlooked, but really critical. And it's something that we talked about on my conversation on the podcast with you, that you should really just treat your team as you would a client. The level of the standard that you're setting for client deliverables, you should also treat your team with that same level of standard because they are either going to make or break your business. So you want to give that part of your business the attention that it deserves. So that's kind of where I would focus. I would say client experience is the biggest thing that you should tackle right out of the gate, making sure that that is solid. And then from there, you can start tackling other areas of your business slowly.
I love that you mentioned how branding is an important component here, particularly when you're talking about scaling with a team. Like if you do not have a solid brand strategy, scaling with a team will expose it. Because this is what happens when it's just you, like you are the brand. So you can fill in the gaps, you can clarify things on calls, you can adjust your messaging in real time. But then the moment you bring on a team member, everything that lives in your head now has to be translated. And if it's not clear, if it's not consistent, if it's not documented, that's when the brand starts to fragment. And your designer will interpret it one way, your copywriter is going to say it another way, your social media manager is going to post something that's like almost sounding like you, but not totally, not quite. And then suddenly like this brand that you've worked so hard to build, it starts to dilute. And I think this is actually why a lot of people don't hire. They're so afraid to hire because they're like, oh, well, nobody's going to represent my brand the way that I do. But like, imagine if Coca-Cola felt that way, or Lululemon or Nike, if they felt like they could never hire because somebody else couldn't articulate the brand. Like, no, they were able to scale because they had a solid brand strategy and it was documented. And I think that's why debunking this common misconception that branding is a luxury or just like a fancy bell and whistle, like branding is infrastructure. Branding is operational because it's going to give your team a clear voice to write in. It's going to give them a defined position to market from, a standard to design to, and like really a filter for every decision that they make. And without it, scaling creates a lot of inconsistency, but with it, it creates so much momentum. Like, you don't scale a business without a brand strategy. I think you scale confusion and you call it growth. And that's why you talked about in corporate America, the operations are a mess. Probably the companies that don't have solid operations or things are constantly scattered, it probably started on a more foundational level of not sitting down and clarifying, okay, what is our mission? Where are we headed? What are the values that we want to embody? Who are we speaking to? What are our non-negotiables? Like, those are all of the things that when you're working with a strategic brand agency that's going to really help you develop those are the things that make a business scale faster and have much broader impact than if you don't get really clear on those at the beginning.
Exactly. I mean, when you have those things in place, you're setting your team up for success, right? If everything's just living in your head, how do you expect them to execute their responsibilities to the standard that you want them to or expect them to? They're just going to fail. You're doing yourself a service as well as your team and your business when you are getting everything out of your head onto paper so that people can execute it the way that you need it to.
What else do we need to have in place before we hire so we can ensure that our hires actually relieve us rather than creating more work for us?
Documented processes, number one. So start off with the client experience and then work through all the different areas. Whatever is living in your head, you want it to be documented so that you can truly pass it on to somebody else and get it off your plate. If the process lives within your head, you're always going to be that person that it comes back to. And you're always going to be double checking everything and correcting things and redoing it because you think it's easier just to do it yourself. And then the second is role clarity. You need not just job titles, which I think that people think is like the biggest aspect of it. I need to figure out what this job title is going to be, but genuinely understanding what this person is going to own, what decisions are they empowered to make on their own, what success is going to look like within their role so that they have clarity as to how they need to perform and how they need to execute and how their work actually connects to everything else within the business and within the team. So without that new hire is defaulting back to that founder constantly. She's right back to being the bottleneck that she wanted to stop being when she brought somebody on. And the third is an onboarding system. So onboarding somebody, like we kind of talked about a little bit, is so important. Most founders onboard by themselves, just by being available to that individual. They answer questions as they come up throughout the day. They walk people through things in real time. And, that's really hard to follow for somebody that doesn't have full context of the entire business. And then they course correct as they're going in real time. And, that might work once when you're in the very early stages with maybe one contractor or something that is in a very specific scaled back role, but that doesn't scale a business or a team. So real onboarding system means that a new person can get caught up to speed, can understand the full context of the business, what you guys do, how you do it, why you do it, or how you do it differently, what sets you apart in the industry, like everything that goes along with that, and their role and how they're supposed to execute. And then they can start contributing to the team and to the business without requiring her full attention for, I would say, months, because it can take like 3 to 6 months, depending on the role. It can take up to a year for that light bulb to finally go off and for her to really settle into that role. So those are the things that I think are super important. And then when those things are in place, hiring just compounds the capacity of the founder at that point. Without them, it just redistributes the chaos amongst a bigger group of people and creates a management burden.
Yeah. And those are two very different roles.
Very different roles.
Jessica, when you look at your most successful clients, what character traits do you think they all have in common?
So resilience is number one, the biggest thing.
Okay.
You are going to have massive ups and downs, which I'm sure you can relate. When it comes to running a business, it is the biggest self-development journey that you will ever go on as well, which also impacts how you run a business and, its performance at times. So when those downs hit, either in the business or personally, her resilience and her bounce back rate are very critical to keep things moving forward. Another one is decisiveness, making decisions quickly, yes, based off of intuition and what feels right, but also backed by real data. So making sure that they're tracking their KPIs to understand what's working and what's not working within their business, and then they take action immediately. And then that kind of leads into the other one is they view failure as simply information.
Yeah.
Right? That's all it is. It's not anything personal whatsoever. It is data that they can then use to adjust their plans, to pivot in a different direction, or to just simply learn about something about themselves or their team or their business that will impact future decisions. And then the other thing is being just coachable, not thinking that they are the ones that know it all because they started the business from the ground up. They are open to having their thinking challenged by their team, by people that are experts being brought into the business to support them growing. They care more about building something that actually functions, that is going to get them to that North Star, to their big vision, more than about being right or about being the smartest person in the room.
I love that. All of those character traits are amazing character traits as founders to try and embody. But resilience, absolutely. I think entrepreneurship will test your resilience over and over again. Being coachable and being willing to have your ideas challenged, which is also part of having a team, right? I can tell you, especially with having the same girls for 5-6 years, my ideas get challenged all the time. And I'm sure early on that used to kind of like ruffle my feathers a little bit and be like, hey, like I hired you, remember? But I am so grateful because I can tell you a lot of our best innovations at Brandwell were not my ideas. They were ideas from my team, from the people that were actually on the quote unquote front lines, actually communicating with the clients for a long duration of time. And that's a really important skill, I would say, for a founder. If you are hiring a team, like you hired them for a reason, right? You obviously saw something in them. So don't bridle that by, always just saying it's my way or the highway. Like listen, ask for their feedback and create an environment where they feel confident sharing their ideas or even, dare I say, challenging you on your own ideas, because I've had a lot of ideas that didn't make it past my team. And I wish they would have because I thought they were great ideas, but my team was able to poke holes in them and say, Victoria, like I don't know that this is going to get you closer to the vision that you have for Brandwell. I think it's like exciting. It might, drive some revenue early on, but I don't think it's going to drive us closer to the end game. And that also starts by having a team that's clearly onboarded to your vision and your mission, So I love everything that you shared. This has been such an insightful conversation. Jessica, for somebody who is struggling with, being so involved in the day-to-day and they know that they need this type of service, where can they go to find out more about your agency?
So you can find me online at HavenOaksCo.com, or you can send me a chat or a DM on Instagram, so at HavenOaksCo as well. And send me any questions that you have. Let me know what frictions you're experiencing in your business, and we can chat through it. But I'm more than happy to support in any way.
And we'll link everything for you guys in the show notes. Thank you, Jessica, for coming on the Branding Business School podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Business School podcast. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll continue to cheer you on week after week by giving you practical advice on how to build your brand. For show notes or to learn more about what we covered in today's episode, head to thebrandingbusinessschool.com/podcast. And remember, you don't need an MBA to be the CEO.